Ladies and gentlemen, this Red Gamer Tech.com video. I have a question. Could Sony dominate the console market in the future and continue to do so? Because a recent article in the Wall Street Journal examines this very potential. And they've actually got an analyst. Their name is Ichi Katayama, who is an analyst at Bank of America / Merrill Lynch. So, prestigious, to say the least. And they are quoted in saying Sony has the potential to make the game console market its exclusive territory. Now, I would provide a link. As I said, it's from the Wall Street Journal, but it's pretty pointless because it is quite literally a paywall. So you're going to get just a couple of sentences of text, and then after that it just fades out and says, well, if you want to read this, bro, you're going to have to cough up cash. But anyway, the basic premise of the article is that Sony plans to turn the games division into a hub. So in other words, it wants to develop a service to stream games onto phones, tablets, other devices, and so on and so on. And it basically wants to make the PlayStation brand to be pretty much pivotal. So we can look short term, we can look at the sales, and the PlayStation 4 is definitely doing very well. In some markets it's outselling Xbox One quite substantially, particularly in, of course, Japan. However, I would argue that one of the primary reasons that the Xbox One has done fairly miserably in Japan would actually not be to do with Microsoft themselves necessarily, being beaten by Sony, but actually Microsoft being beaten by Microsoft. It's fair to say that they haven't really had the games lineup that many Japanese would probably be interested in. It's a very Western type of titles that are out. So on top of that, lack of media coverage in comparison to the Xbox 360 or the original Xbox, and it certainly doesn't do well for the sales figures. But moreover, Sony have already started to pull a lot of exclusive marketing deals. They have the DLC rights to, say, Destiny, and apparently early reports do suggest that the PlayStation 4 got quite a nice helping hand with that deal. Also, in the longer term picture, we've got PlayStation Now and Morpheus from Sony. I've got to say that I'm still somewhat skeptical about the whole Morpheus idea when it comes to consoles. Having used Oculus Rift on the PC, I can say that I really like the technology, but I'm somewhat skeptical on how it's going to be delivered on a console which has very much more a limited budget in terms of, well, raw performance. But anyway, I'll reserve judgment. As for the PlayStation Now, same thing. I personally dislike game streaming quite substantially, but let's face it, PlayStation Now is also going to have a lot of competition in the future. It's fair to say that Google, Apple, pretty much every single bloody company in the world is going to start to really push this anyway. So, what are my thoughts? Because if you look at history, it's fair to say that the PlayStation 1 absolutely dominated the console industry. It really did. The PlayStation 2 did the same thing. I actually don't necessarily agree with the history in terms of how it actually played out. I personally feel that the GameCube, and to a slightly lesser extent, actually no, I wouldn't even go as far as to say lesser extent, I would say equally so, the original Xbox deserved a lot more of the pie than what they ended up with. I felt that the PS4, PS2 did pretty well, but let's face it, the original Xbox, yes, the Dreamcast did online gaming previously, and yes, there were other services with online before even the DC, but the Xbox really helped to solidify and unify online gaming for consoles. The GameCube as well had quite a few killer apps, but in the end the PlayStation 2 just seemed to have like a runaway success. I feel some of this was to do with marketing and some of it was to do with the success of the previous console. With the PlayStation 1, basically Sega screwed themselves over so much with the original Saturn launch. It just was absolutely just horrible. I mean, back in the day when I was really young, I just didn't understand how badly they screwed it up, but now in hindsight, oh dear. And of course, Sony pretty much had the run for themselves until Nintendo came up with the N64, which did pretty well, but the cartridges were very expensive, so that didn't help their marketing efforts either. So in other words, they were definitely synonymous with gaming. The more mature audience that they were appealing to also meant that they had more cash on average. So they did fairly well for themselves. Now, however, it's a very different situation. And I don't necessarily agree and fully subscribe to the point of view of this analyst. There are multiple reasons as to this. Microsoft have ridiculously deep pockets. They've just spent over $2 billion on Mojang. And yes, there are reasons probably they've done this. They're not altruistic, certainly purely altruistic. Some of them are, according to Satya Nadella, in other words, the boss over at Microsoft, they wanted it for educational purposes, which is fair enough. I follow Bill Gates quite a bit. I've got, followed him on Facebook and Twitter and so on, and I do know that he is very into the whole charity and education and so on and so on. So that would make sense, and Minecraft is definitely a great learning tool, but there's also a lot of ability to monetize there. And I don't even necessarily mean like microtransactions for a new pickaxe. I more mean that a new version of Minecraft or a good downloadable pack for Minecraft, like a huge thing, where they add like a whole bunch of extra content, a load of extra tools, and I'm sure they could do it. And if it made it exclusive, or like a timed exclusive for the Microsoft platform, so for example, the Xbox One and possibly the Windows-based PCs, it would definitely give the Xbox One a shot in the arm. Microsoft are also being extremely aggressive with their pricing. And this is not also discussing Nintendo, which are being fairly dark horse at the moment. They're actually being a little odd. Nintendo, we're almost positive, are working on a new console. There's rumours, the Terminal Fusion, to say that the console is going to be an absolute beast. Then you've also got Sony, with their financial situation. To be honest, one of the problems Sony have is this ball and chain of debt that they've accumulated through their mobile division, which is somewhat ironic since I've just bought literally an Android Sony phone before I heard about this, but there you have it. They've got issues with all the other divisions they've bought as well. Supposedly their laptop divisions and stuff really did badly, and to shut these down or to make them profitable isn't going to be like something they do overnight. Now, that doesn't necessarily hugely impact the PlayStation division, but it also possibly could, because let's face it, if your main corporation is doing extremely well, it's very profitable and lucrative, it means that you do have excess marketing budget. You don't need to worry so much about, oh, okay, well, we're breaking even on the PlayStation division because we're spending so much money buying exclusives, or we're buying this. One argument that's routinely used against Microsoft is, oh, you're just buying your exclusives, but there's always money being changed hands. It's always a positive or a negative. So in other words, this Destiny DLC, or at some points, to be honest, Destiny was almost synonymous with the PlayStation 4 at one point. There was very little marketing done around Destiny actually being released on other consoles. So you can tell that there was definitely money being changing hands there. So I don't really know that we're going to have this situation, because another major problem, I mean, it also depends on what the future of consoles is. I discussed this in another video, and some analysts believe that we're not going to get a PlayStation 5, or we're not going to get an Xbox 2, which I also don't personally agree with. I think we probably will, and I think we're going to get them soon. Sony are definitely pushing this whole we are more powerful, and before the launch they marketed all the time as the most powerful games console out there, and PlayStation 4 blah 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 for the players, and they definitely rabbit punched Microsoft repeatedly in the face, despite the fact that, to be honest, Microsoft did that themselves with the whole DRM thing. Microsoft, fixed that, and I will say Microsoft incredibly good when it comes to, I think Microsoft have done very well changing their policies as quickly as they did, but let's face it, some of them did lasting damage to their image and company, and definitely made people change their pre-order to the PlayStation 4, which isn't particularly a good thing. You're just basically losing customers through your own policies. And as I said, Microsoft did change some of these, but it still helped Sony at the end of the day. With all of that said, there are some analysts who believe that we're going to get smart devices very soon, which are going to be incredibly powerful, which are going to basically plug into your, I don't know, TV or monitor or whatever, your projector, and that will basically be as powerful as a next generation console. And there is some merit to this. The fact that phones have a much shorter shelf life. In other words, the iPhone 6 is out now, and the iPhone 7 will be out in maybe 1.5 years or whatever. And the iPhone 8 will come out, and so on and so on. The problem is, however, at the end of the day, the iPhone 6 is considerably slower than even the Tegra K1, in game benchmarks anyway. And this is going to be the case for a long time, so we don't have that level of technology. PCs, however, are definitely becoming extremely powerful. So it also depends on your perspective of streaming. This is a really open to interpretation, and to be honest, Analyst doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be going how it is. I feel that Microsoft and Nintendo are both extremely competitive still. I feel that Nintendo need to do a lot more, but I've got to say, from someone who didn't even want to touch the Wii, say 6 months ago, now I'm looking at the Wii lineup and I'm thinking to myself, oh look, Bayonetta, Zelda and so on, oh, that's actually looking quite a sweet. I definitely feel that once again, Nintendo hurt themselves. They didn't have enough killer apps at the launch, and they admitted that was their bad. They said that they just underestimated how long it was going to take to create title for the console, which they shouldn't have done, which is a little bit bad of Nintendo. But okay, it is what it is. I also feel that Nintendo's system should have been a bit more powerful than what it was. I'm not saying it should have been like twice as powerful, but you know, a little bit of extra muscle there so it could have competed with, at least somewhat with the next generation of consoles would have been good. But then again, I say all of this, but Nintendo have very deep pockets as well. Yes, they have taken some losses themselves, and no one likes to do so, but they have still a lot of cash reserves. And let's face it, they've got a lot of IPs they can leverage. The 3DS is doing well, they've got another one coming out, and so on and so forth. So, who knows? I do feel, however, that Nintendo can't keep screwing up the hardware. The Wii U did so-so, but let's hope it does better. But the original Wii did extremely well. I would argue some of this was to do with a fluke, and some of it was to do with the cheapness of the hardware and the control method, the novelty factor. But I feel the next system they have to release has got to be a killer app. But that's kind of how Nintendo seems to do things. Like, there's always one flop, then a really successful system. It just seems to be the way that their main system seems to work. Anyway, guys, let me know what your thoughts are on this one. Personally, I feel it's not really going to be quite as cut and dry as this, as Wall Street Journal are making it out. But I'll leave it in your opinions as well. Anyway, take care and bye for now.